Hey there, it's Sean from London Pen Co. Today we're going to start a series on my pen journey. I started turning pens about 20 years ago after visiting the local wood show. I started originally with these simple two-part kit pens, and now I'm making these one-of-a-kind kitless pens. These we'll deal with later. These we're going to deal with today. I started, with a small little lathe. Actually, my first lathe was run by a drill. It was bolted to a desk and used a drill. My upgrade for that was a little trigger that I could actually get a variable speed and speed it up and slow it down. Those were the bad days of pen turning. I didn't know how to sharpen my tools. I didn't really know what I was doing. I eventually took a course at Lee Valley Tools, a one-day course, and they taught me how to turn, sand, and finish a pen properly. After that, everything got easier. I got a little bigger lathe, learned how to sharpen my tools, got a grinder, and then progressed from there. At times, I would turn 1 pen a year or sometimes 50 pens a month. It's one of those hobbies that grows. What I love about it is there's all sorts of pen kits, types, and materials. They even have crazy things like coffee beans cast in resin now. And this was a popular seller when I made this one. So we're going to go over today how to turn this or this and this into one of these. I love these little Canadian pens. They've got little maple leaves on them. They're a one-piece pen, so it's a nice quick project. And we'll get started. We're going to drill this, cut this to length, drill it out, glue in the centers, and then we'll turn and finish it and then assemble. So let's grab our pieces, grab our safety glasses, head over to the bandsaw. Okay, here we are at the bandsaw. I built this little jig. I very rarely will make one pen anymore. If I'm doing a run of pens, I might be doing 10 or 20. So I'll set up my stop. I use the brass tube to set the length, give myself a little space on each side. Just slide it over. We'll turn the bandsaw on. Got my push stick. Always make sure the blades stop before I reach in and grab anything. And there we have the pen blank. It's cut perfectly to size. Now we have to drill out the center. So now we're going over to the drill press. Okay, here we are at the drill press. A few years ago when I was doing a lot of pens, upgraded my drill press to get one that had really long throw. That way some of the longer pens I can get through in one stage. But I basically have this jig here to hold the pens, hold them at 90 degrees, and this is a very important piece. I use this and slide it along, and what it does is as the drill bit comes through the bottom, it supports the fibers of the bottom and you don't get blowout. Very important trick that allows you to save a lot of pen blanks. So you drop it in, and with some pressure holding it down, clamp it up. Turn on the drill press. Get it in the center. And it's not a race. Each material will cut differently. Some cut really well. The further that you get in though, the more often you have to retract and to make sure that you get rid of the chips. Getting close to the bottom now, it's going to break through. You want to be really gentle at this point. I felt it break through. Turn it off. Double check. And there we have a nice round hole in the bottom. Now the next step is to get the tubes ready to glue in. Okay, we now have our blanks. We have to prepare our brass tubes. So we're quickly going to change over here. We'll get rid of the jig. and we need to put in our flapper wheel. It might seem like a simple step, but if you don't do this, you really risk not getting a good glue joint. No good glue joint, you get your failures. Trust me, I have probably made every mistake you can make making pens. This was the one that solved probably the most of my problems. Oh, well, we better get it in there straight. Okay, there we go. So we just turn it on. Now we just need to rough up these brass tubes. So I'm just going to slowly rotate, get them all scratched up. It's important to do this because you don't want any shiny spots. You want a little bit of tooth everywhere for the glue to glue, because it's a mechanical bond that bonds this to the wood, not a chemical bond. So you want that tooth in those. So there we go. They're all roughed up. I won't touch them much with my fingers now. Let's head back to the bench and get these glued in. Okay, we're back here at the bench. We're ready to get gluing up. First things first though, I learned the hard way by gluing my fingers together many times. Buy the gloves, they're cheap, and keep your hands clean, keep the chemicals off them. So we'll get the glue, and I know approximately for 2 pens how much I'm going to need. We'll do down here. Glue goes in. I push it right through the end. And I'm looking in, and I can see that reflectivity all the way through. Again, I'll put some on the piece. And I'm twisting it the whole time I'm pushing it in, and then rubbing some glue off the stick onto it as well. If I need to, I can push it all the way through, and I can see there's good glue coverage. This is one of the things that you learn about making pens. This step is really super important. What you want to do is make sure you get a good glue joint. If you have a good glue joint, you're going to have a much more successful turn. If you don't get glue everywhere, when you're turning, you can create a weak spot in your wood. It'll just chip off. Then all that work is gone. So now there's nothing to do but wait for these to dry. This stuff takes 3 or 4 hours. It foams out, and then you're able to get started. Here we are back at the bench. Through the magic of TV, these are now dry. You can see how the glue is foamed right up, and it's hard to the touch. You can pick at it, and if it's too early, that'll still be soft. So now I use this pen tool to square off the end. But instead of squaring it off by hand or trying to hold on to it, I just use a clamp. A little smaller. Clamp it up. There we go, we can see the brass. Again, this side will be quicker because it's closer to this end. Perfect. So there we have it. Both you can see the clean brass. See the clean brass here, and on this side, the same with this one. So now we're going to put it on the mandrel, take it over the lathe and turn it. So I know that I have these two, and these are the size. This is the size the pen needs to be. So this one goes here. The rest of those I'm just going to use as spacers. So this goes on, then I add some spacers, just enough so that the nut will tighten fully. And I'm able to tighten it on. It has to get quite tight because it has to hold that in place. There we go. Now we'll take it over to the lathe and start turning. Okay, so the most important part of turning on the wood lathe is sharp tools. Without a sharp tool, you can't get a good cut, can't get a good finish. So I use the Wolverine jig. It's fairly easy to use. You just set the tool in, measure your distance, tighten it down, come over here and get a rough approximation. So I'm just about right there, tighten it up. Then I'm going to use a marker trick that was taught to me by my teacher. Just put a little bit of Sharpie on there. Then you turn the machine on. And I'm just going to lightly touch the tool. You can see now the line runs all the way up. All the Sharpie's gone. It's perfectly sharp all the way around the edge. Okay, here we are at the lathe. We've got our mandrel set up in. We've got our tool rest adjusted to the right height. We want it as tight as possible to the block. And we've just freshly sharpened our tools. Now there's two tools I would use to do this. I would use the bowl, or no, sorry, not the bowl gouge, but the spindle gouge. And the spindle gouge is specifically for doing spindle work turning this way. And the skew. This is my preferred tool. I've taken a lot of time to get used to using this tool, and I find I have a lot more control with it. So we'll get started. So the first process, I want to get this round. This is a dangerous time. There's a lot sticking out, so I'm going to go real slow, and I'm just going to take the edges off. You can hear square, and as it gets into round, you can actually hear it cutting nicer. But now we're going to do it on this side. Just gentle. Let the tool do the cutting. There's no forcing this. So I constantly check the lathe. So I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to test, make sure this is still tight. It vibrates a lot. Things can come loose. So to be safe, make sure you're double checking that. Get into the habit. I will constantly check the tension, make sure it's still on. This is going to be one beautiful pen. Now that I can see what it's going to look like. So now I'm going to refine the shape. I'm going to move this in a little closer. And a lot of people who turn wood, consider it's kind of like, for me, it's my meditation. I have to concentrate so fully on what I'm doing to get the shape and avoid mistakes that it takes me to a bit of a place where I just kind of relax and chill out. So we're going to take this now, get it closer to the correct size, the bushings, and then we'll refine it. So again, just slow, easy cuts. I'm not pushing this. I'm just letting the tool do the cutting. Now that it's gotten a little smaller, I can speed it up a bit too. As you get closer, it's running slower. And if I started to force this, I'd easily break off a piece and ruin the whole thing. And it might not be necessary for pens to get that perfect, but it's a perfect time to practice getting a consistent stroke. Wow, this is going to be a beautiful pen. I'm going to switch to the over the top now and refine the shape. So I'm just sneaking up on it because I don't want to go too far. When you're done, there's not a whole lot of wood left on that brass tube. So slow and steady is better. Now, with this chisel, I can use it like a scraper. Just refine that edge. I don't want any kind of burr there. Okay, there we go. We're ready for sanding. So now I'll pull the banjo out of the way, get my sandpaper, and I cut all my sandpaper up into little squares, and then I can go through each grit, do it in, and what I do is I take it, fold it in thirds, then I get 3 uses out of it. That side, and then that side. So, another thing that I've developed a habit for is I'm going to turn the lathe on now, and I am not going to turn the lathe back off until this is buffed. Now this material is stabilized maple burl. So it's got to stabilize like a plastic injected into it, so I don't actually have to finish this. I will buff it. So one of the things I like to do is, start it, sand it all the way through, buff it, and then stop the lathe and see what it looks like. So here we go. I do slow it down a bit. You can generate too much heat with your sandpaper if you're not careful. But this stabilized maple burl sands beautifully. It's one of my favorite materials. All the work is done with this first grit. Okay, you're going to do any kind of shaping, get out any tool marks, and then every successive grit after that, all you're doing is getting rid of the scratches from the previous grit. So I'll spend a little longer with this one, get things just perfect. So on to the next. Again, this is going to go fast now. All I'm doing is removing the scratches from the previous grit. It's getting really smooth now. This is 220. We'll go to 320 and 400. I can feel it getting a little warm, so we'll stop for a second. I'll go to the 400. Now the 6. Now I can feel with my thumb just how smooth this is getting. And one thing that I won't do is I never wrap. My only pressure is from underneath. That way there's no danger of snagging my fingers. Don't ask how I learned that. So 600, that's as far as we need to go with the sandpaper. Now I'll get my 2 buffing blocks, my Tripoli and my aluminum oxide. You can see the color's going to just really start to pop now. I'm going to turn the speed up and buff it. You can see it really shining. Do another one. Again, I'm always switching to a clean part of the cloth. And then at the ends I go off because I don't want to bring any of the metal onto it, because it will actually take some of the burnishing off the metal and pull it on. Now we'll go to the aluminum oxide. Buff that. Again, at the ends, go off the metal, or off onto the metal. There we go. So this is the part where we stop it, and we'll see what we have. Wow, that is a beautiful piece of wood. All right, now we can take this off the lathe. We'll take it over and assemble the final pen. See you over at the bench. Okay, here we are back at the bench. Got my pen blank all polished up. I'm going to just take it off, do one final little step. So the last step I do, and again, learn through experience, so I'm just going to lightly sand the end and the end, and slightly just kind of bevel that. And that's just going to make sure that there's no loose fibers that could possibly flake off. So there we go. So normally when I'm making pens, there's all sorts of different finishes, like a steel, a pewter, and a gold. And I'll usually take the blank and look at it with each of the finishes. And I already knew this one was going to look great with the gold. And because it's a two-sided blank, I'll check both sides just aesthetically to see which is most pleasing. And I think I like it that way. So with these are a really simple pen to assemble. We basically got to squeeze on the cap. Now normally I have a pen press, but I managed to leave that at home. So I'll just use this vise to gently squeeze the cap on. Now I'm going to purposely choose where to have the clip. Okay, so now we'll finish the assembly. We have the cap clamped on. Again, these are the most simple kits to assemble. Just put the ink piece in, make sure that it turns, and then this part just slides on. Test that fit, perfect. There's nothing sticking out. And that's a finished pen. And there you have it, the finished pen. Thanks for watching. Join me next time. We're going to go on to the next stage of my evolution, the first kitless pen.